So as we discussed, with the rise of social business platforms, as they get more mature in organisations and it becomes easier to see the natural networks that people have, the natural spheres of influence is more visible to people. Who are the winners and losers in this space? And I'm thinking particularly about the role of management, middle management. Historically what that was and how that changes now, that talent can be visible to all.
If we think about the role of a manager and we decouple it from notions of status and power and influence and hierarchy, what we're left with is an individual that's helping others get the best out of their work, coordinate resources, coordinate activity.
Facilitator, if you will.
Facilitator. And again, these aren't new concepts, as we know. So Greenleaf back in the 70s wrote a paper about servant leadership, and I don't like the term servant, right, because it's loaded, but what management becomes is a service to others. It's about servicing the team as much as it's about the team servicing management, which is really what happens today.
And are you therefore saying that the enlightened manager will actually embrace the coming of social inside the organisation because it will actually make it easier for them to service the company?
I think we're seeing it today, aren't we? So we see it happening in enlightened organisations. It was Gibson, wasn't it, that said, the future's here, but it's just unevenly distributed. So we do see this in many companies, and not just in Silicon Valley, not just in funky startups in Brighton, but in large organisations. And HCL Technology springs to mind. They're a $4 billion turnover company. They're 80,000 employees, and the individual contributor is the one that their CEO Vinit now calls the value creators, and they get to choose how they get managed. They get to effectively hire their managers.
Okay, so that makes me pause with a degree of concern there, because you can see the immediate objection that's going to come from that. If you start giving that degree of empowerment to individuals within an organisation to decide how they're going to be managed and along what lines, isn't that going to slow down the decision-making process in organisations? Is it going to become unwieldy?
We've heard this question a lot, haven't we? If our organisation is one of inclusive decision-making and we involve more people in the decision-making process, doesn't that slow that down? And actually, I'm going to quote, not word for word, but Terry Kelly, the CEO of W.L. Gore, on this. So he was asked this by Gary Hamel. And the way he responded was to say, look, in organisations today, what happens is strategic decisions get made very often behind closed doors, and then much energy is expended on getting people to buy into those decisions, right? So effectively what happens, everybody leaves the boardroom, and then they embark on this sales process, sometimes one by one, trying to get the organisation to buy into the decision, to support the decision, to execute the decision. Now, that doesn't happen in an environment where there's inclusive decision making, right? So whilst, Terry Kelly would say, yes, sometimes it does take a long time for us to arrive at a decision, when they arrive at it, they've got buy-in baked into the decision and they execute very quickly.
Oh, that's a great answer. And you begin to realise that there's a re-engineering going on here. This is really why social is such a revolution, because the whole decision-making process itself is being re-engineered.
It is. So if you think about that org chart again, it's that one-dimensional org chart. That's supposed to say how decisions are being made, right? That's supposed to
reflect that.
Yeah, it's supposed to reflect how decisions get made. And so decisions that get made today probably get made how they did yesterday. What a social graph allows us to do, and what enterprise social tools allow us to do, is to assemble the right people to make the decision. So that what that means is not only do decision makers, the people involved in decisions, not only do they change from day-to-day, situation to situation, they might even change from decision to decision, right? So yesterday I was the one responsible for the decision. I had to make the judgment call, right? So somebody's always got to do that. Let's not mix collaborative and consensus. But actually,
right.
the next decision, I might just be consulting, or it might be impacting me, and I'm just providing input, or somebody else might be providing some data, or any role in any decision may change from decision to decision, depending on what the decision needs.
Well, I think you'll have given great hope and succour to a lot of middle managers who might have otherwise been a bit worried about where this was going, because really what you're starting to say is very exciting. I think you're talking about managers being the assemblers of great decisions in an organisation, putting together the relevant parties and resources to make great decisions. So would it be fair to say that you could in a way replace collaborative decision making with just simply smarter decision making?
Yeah, that's a good point. When we talk about collaborative decisions, we think of them as smarter, right? Because what the data tells us wherever we look, is that those monumentous corporate decisions, organisational decisions that went really wrong, what the data tells us is that they were made by a very small number of people, very often one. And it's what's called sometimes as heroic decision making, right? One man or woman, or at least a very small number, have made the decision. And what we also know is that those kinds of decisions are subject to bias. They can go unchecked, ungoverned, unmanaged, and there's lots of data to support the fact that decisions that go through a process of being debated, where you can get lots of input, diverse opinion, where they can be discussed and collaborated and shared across the organisation.
You would argue have a greater chance of success.
Absolutely.
Thank you, that's brilliant.
That makes them